So we have got some gorgeous end of winter, just tipping into spring, um, paint photographs here of images of some gorgeous carpets of these early spring flowers. Now, it obviously depends on where you are. Um, I always think in North Yorkshire, we're about 3 weeks behind the south, or even the Midlands in terms of our weather. So even Scotland might be even more behind. Although I do remember on looking at Highgrove, and they're maybe another week behind us. So it's not too the gap's not too big up here. But I know for a fact that I've definitely got my daffs aren't out, but I know other people's are in this area. Snowdrops are out, and crocuses definitely are out. So really lovely. It's just fabulous, isn't it, when we start to see them emerge? I just love this time of year because it's kind of like signals that the nicer weather is on its way and we can just really, we're just going into spring now. I love it. Absolutely love it. So this painting is just trying to get a sense of that, and we can just get lost in the fun side of it. So I'm going to go for this one, which is a carpet of crocuses. And I did have to double check when I was looking at the images and just decide it wasn't actually bluebells, but it's not. So, this is obviously a heavily crocused area, but we would tend to get I mean, obviously that's got a lot more patches between it. But the daffs, you do tend to get strips or swathes of it, coming through. Sometimes you get like, you know, gaps through, don't you, and everything. And this is definitely true. Sometimes the way they just end up being, well, sometimes I don't know if it's maybe just where people have walked through before. They emerge and it kind of creates these lovely gaps and everything. So whichever one you fancy, one of the joyful things about doing this is once we've got the groundwork in place and we've kind of got a little bit of that, then we can really just think about, as one of my lovely members said today, I just really enjoy just dotting it on. So we can really get into the flow of popping all these lovely things in here. So let's have a look. So this one, whichever one you're doing, you can kind of put, you can section off into two parts generally, or it might even have more than two parts. Now, because we're layering up with acrylics, if you're drawing with a pencil, do it nice and lightly so that you don't get it all scrubbing up underneath. Now, obviously, there's a little bit more going on and different colours in there, and that's fine. I'm just going to pop a general line across there. And what I'm going to be thinking about are the colours and things between there, but I'm not going to get too lost in the detail of that. We did do it today and just start to think about what's in the background there. But of course, that will all go back. So it's much easier than we think it is actually. Once we've got our head around it, I know what happens is we tend to really zone in on this bit. And then actually, once we do this, everything sinks back anyway. So what I just say is don't get too caught up in the technical side of this. Just kind of just get it in, and then we can always then focus a little bit more on that foreground because that's going to slip back. So because we're layering up with acrylics, back to layering up approach, we want to do in the very back, which is in the sky coming forwards, and you can see at the top here, that's where you get the skyline coming through pretty much. And then we've got behind these trees at the front, which I'm not going to put on any of that to start with because they will overlap and it's just too finicky between to get all these things in. But if you're doing this one, for example, you could put that in as a block because it's quite a big block. Again, you might want to put these over the top once you've got these strips behind, because again, it might be a bit too finicky to kind of get between, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. And then here, that's a big one. And then behind, you might just kind of pop in. And of course, you can change anything. If you don't want to put half of those trees in behind, then you really don't have to do it. It's your painting. You are the artist and you can make those decisions completely. I'm just going to get a little bit of kitchen roll ready to wipe off my palette knife off. and just enjoy these amazing colours. And I've gone for purple just because I just need to see purple, I think. I just need some colour. So that's why I've gone for that one. But so this one's very cool in tone. So I'm going to be using quite a bit of different colours. But for the sky, I'm actually going to experiment with the two blues. So sometimes we get different colours in our kit, don't we? So I'm going to go in with what's that one? Ultramarine blue. There we go. In fact, I'm going to squirt out more ultramarine blue, so I'm going to use it today. And I'm going to go in with phthalo blue, or you could use cerulean or whatever else you've got in there. I'm just going to go in with that one. They'll give you two different effects. I'm also going to put a bit of Payne's Grey there because I know I'm going to need it. I'm going to use it on some of these trees in the background. Oh dear. It came flying out. Flying out then. Right, that's my test a bit there. And then I'm going to go in with some white because obviously the sky and everything we're going to use that. I'll probably have to pour some more out white out later, but I'm just going to get this one in first. Right, I think I'm just going to go in so with some tones here. The only way this is this slightly warmer one here, and there's a bit of warmth coming through there as well. If we're putting warm in with like cooler colours, you might want to actually wait until that background's dry and put a wash of a warmer colour over this with this one. So really thin down once that background is dry, so that you're not kind of getting this muddled in and getting a green sky. So we would just literally wait and get that background and wait until it's dry. And then as you're coming over the top of everything, you can just put a warmer, so water it right down like a watercolor and then put that over the top. So it's not going to turn your sky green. With this one, this is a very cool palette. So it's leaning on the blue side, whereas this one is quite warm. It's got like yellows and warm greens and things in there. Maybe the sky's a little bit different. So I'm just going to go and mix two bits, the top of the sky here colour and then the bottom bit here. And then I'll think about overlaying these other trees and things in there. So to start with, just going to get the tiniest bit of blue. I'm going to go in with blue ultramarine for the sky, but you can have a little play with whatever colour blues you've got there. That's the joy of it, isn't it? So we can experiment, just see what colours you put. And obviously I always say a lot less blue, but if you're trying another colour and you love it, use it. You might have cerulean blue, which is lovely. It's a bit more uplifting than this one, which is quite, it's quite a dullish sky, but I'm fine with that tonight. So I'm going to go in with this. This is ultramarine and white, which has made a really light coloured tint. But then I want a slightly different blue tint for the bottom, and I'm going to get them both ready at the same time. So we've said that before, haven't we? That if you mix up a couple of colours at the same time, you can then blend those in the background. So this is the one I'm going to go for. This is phthalo blue. I'm going to make it just slightly darker, actually. Just enjoy mixing with your palette knife or whatever you're mixing with. So you get the colour that you want. And it's a little bit darker over this side behind. So I may even add in another element, but I'll see. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll split this. I didn't do that this morning, but every time we do a painting, we kind of change it. So I'm going to go in with a bit of Payne's Grey there and make that a little bit more dull for over this side. Payne's Grey is a very dark kind of a blue black colour. need a real tiny amount of it. But you don't have to change that one if you want to keep it a bit lighter, that's fine. I'm going to fill up my pipette and then obviously just give these a test as well, just to make sure those are the colours that I am happy to go for. So this is the darker of the two. That's the lighter one. And this is the top sky colour. Okay. I could probably add a little bit more of a darker tone to that one. Just a tad. There's not much difference in it. Sometimes that helps, you know, if you've got one area that's where the sun's coming down and then another area where it's a bit more shadowy, just to kind of vary it a little bit. I'm just adding a real tiny amount of water to mine. Again, depending on how stiff your paints are, you might want to add a little bit more water. If it's really stiff and it's not kind of covering very easily, it feels like the paint's dragging on it, you might just want to add a little bit more water. Wipe off my palette now. And then pop a little bit water in there. Getting it really nice and buttery. Hey, and I'm going to go in with a flat brush to do this. Now, obviously mine's a bit smaller because I've got a very small area here, but I know with a flat brush what does happen is we can blend those areas really quite easily. So I'm loading up the brush. I've got a good couple of millimeters on there. If I turn my brush on its side, you can see it's really kind of standing off the brush. So I'm going to start, get that top area in. And you can see it's just really kind of working it in. And it's got enough fluid that it's keeping moving quite nicely. It's not kind of leaving any gaps in the canvas. Sometimes that when it leaves gaps, it's just because we need to pop a little bit more in. Like that. And then as I'm working down a bit more in, because obviously we're going to have trees in here as well. This is a very back. Just got to imagine it's the very back. Because we're putting plenty of paint on, we can kind of like blend the two top bits as well, which is quite nice. And I'm going to go in with this, which is more at the bottom over here, this side. And you'll see we're going to end up with two, like, with a line between the two. Just get this on down to the bottom. So all we need to do is just work that line backwards and forwards together. And that will just completely disappear because we've got plenty. If you've got plenty of paint on, it will disappear. If it feels like it's not blending, you just need more paint in each area and then it will just blend into each other. And then this side, we'll do the same again, but it's slightly got that slightly darker tone over here. So I'm going to pop that in, same again, just kind of backwards and forwards until it disappears. Now, if I want to bring that up a little bit so that it's darker further at the top, I'll just bring that line up a bit. But that's the lovely thing about a flat brush is we can get that, you know, that horizon line to really just disappear and blend really nicely. Okay. And then from there, it's kind of looking on there to see, you know, we've got all of these overlapping trees right behind there. And again, it's just deciding how many you want to put in and how many you want to leave out. So we're not talking about these trees here in the foreground or even this one here. We're talking about the ones that are just kind of in that background there. So, and also the ones that are going back are quite, they're not really prominent. We can see that there, but they're kind of disappearing a bit into the background as well. So we might want to just, when we're making a tint up of the colour that we want, I'm going to go in with a Payne's Grey for that one. But I'm going to add a tint of either a bit of the blue we've just used, like this, because I don't want it to be too you know, to stand out too much. I want it to kind of disappear a bit into the background with the sky. So I'm going to just mix that. And then, so it's a bit more grey, I can always add a bit more depth to it. So I might have two tones, one at this side and one at the other. But you could add white or something to it, or even a bit of the blue, or, you know, have a little play and see what colours that you like when you're mixing them. And then you can use a flat brush, the edge of a flat brush. I could use that on its side to get those fine lines in. I can use a round brush. And again, you'll need, just test out your colours as well. See if they're the colours that you want. If you want them a bit darker, you can add a bit more. Which you do. Sometimes they look a bit different when you put them on. There we go. Or you can use a rigger brush to get these on, but I'm just going to blend these in a little bit. So I'm going quite lightly as well. So with this, if these ones that are in the background, kind of I leave gaps between them, that's fine, because they're really not going to jump forward because they're really, you know, loose and, you know, I'm not doing them too solidly actually, these very back ones, because we'll end up covering them over anyway with everything going in. So I'm just popping in a few. I'm going to look, some are coming up, but a lot of them are just kind of around this bottom area, aren't they, behind. It's how, you know, keeping them loose is the thing. And it may be that some you want to keep even looser, so you can just clean off your brush and then just work in the edges like this, look, so that they become a little bit, just a bit softer and blendier. So if we use a watery brush for that, that will help as well. Well, they're all going to disappear, so they're going to look a bit sticky at the moment, like sticks, but they'll all disappear as we put more coverage in over the top. So I'm almost using it, I suppose, thinned it down a bit, a little bit more like a watercolour. Slightly different to the technique I was using this morning, but both are helpful. I'm trying to keep looking in the distance to see what I can kind of see coming between them. And again, as I said, if you want to thin any down or darken any, you know, it might be that you've got a couple of slightly darker areas in there that you want to pop in. I'm just kind of like just doing a few little broken lines as well, and so I'm going to be putting other things over the top of this. And again, just making it nice and thin. So it looks a bit at the moment like we've got a few bits in a row, and then thinking, you know, are there any other colours before we put the next layer on between there? So is anything sticking out that you think, actually I'm going to lighten any of that background layer? So it could be that you add a bit more of a, there's a bit more of a light colour coming through, so you just put a little bit more of a light tint in. I'm just going to do that in a couple of places here, just so it gives the illusion that that light's popping forwards a bit. And so I'm not going in with a bright white colour here. I'm going in with white with a bit of a tint mixed with a bit of blue. But what I'm actually doing is just popping it in quite watered down. So that's the beauty with acrylic. We can go in really thickly or we can go in a bit more thinly. I'm just popping a few of these little gaps between here. So, and then over here it feels a bit more like greeny in tone. So I'm going to look at that as well. Maybe put a bit of a greeny yellow, might even be a yellow. Let's go for a yellowy one, I think. I'm going to use some yellowy tones anyway, some yellowy greens. Just wash my brush out. So take that colour and then just thin it. Just thin it down. Just make sure though your blue doesn't get into it because it's terrible for shifting your sky green. And I'm just thinning that down a little bit. And can only do this really because it's dry. Okay. And that's all I'm going to add to that little bit, to be fair. And then I'm just going to start to think about, the next trees that are going over the top of there that are just kind of down here. So what I might do before I do any more is just put a little bit of this green coming across here. I'm going to bring the green all the way over actually, and I'll just, so I've got one colour to start with. So I'm going in here with, this one is chrome green, or you might have sap green or something like that. It's a very mid-tone green. It's what we tend to find a lot of our foliage. In most of the kits, you get like a sap green. And I'm going to use the yellow to brighten it up because it might just be quite dull at the moment. And there's some quite acidic green, well, not acidic, some quite warm greens there. So I'm only popping this in so I've got somewhere to sit those trees into. So don't worry because this is going to look very childlike for a moment, for a while, and then it will transform near the end. So if you're going in with a yellow green, you need a very small amount of green and more yellow. And that will just pop. Yellow green is actually a colour that that some of the brands use. And it is just that, it's got more yellow in it than green. So it's a very warm tone. Whereas our viridian greens and things like that are a bit more blue-green. So you can go in with a strip, continue on with your flat brush if you're working bigger. I'm just going to pop in. You can actually pop in if you wanted to. Like, you could start with just one colour if you want to go in with the darker green and then put the lighter one over the top. It's absolutely fine. If you're not sure where to start, just do it all one colour, all the darker one, and then we can work in this lighter green over the top. You can change the amounts as well. I know it's blue over there. I'm just kind of popping in some green just because I'm just going to take that across. So we have got some little pops of green in there. And then whilst I'm there, because it's behind the tree, it's quite difficult to get to, I'm going to go in with that yellow green. Now there's got to be enough contrast, so it may be that you might need to use a slightly different tone of green to make it pop, or more kind of yellow. This one's a lighter yellow in there, got a bright yellow. but I'm not sure it's going to be quite warm enough. We'll try it. What it's all about, just having an experiment, seeing if you can create the colour that you're after. But yeah, it's just about getting the contrast really. So this is, you know, lemon yellow, you might get a similar to. So I'm just kind of blending that in. It's already wet because we've got those two layers in, just popping that in. And then we can start to see these kind of strips here are a little bit different. And we can then put the trees on them. You know, start to place those trees as well. So just keep looking how far out it comes. You can also add in, you know, a brighter colour, a brighter yellow on its own if you wanted to. These colours won't muddy because they're not opposing colours on the spectrum. They're all kind of, we're aiming for a yellowy green anyway. So that should work well. You can dab that on if you want, if you enjoy that dabbing process. And you might have little patches in, you know, the one that you're deciding to do, if you're doing one of the other ones where, you know, you're looking at the differences in tone, just slight differences there. Right. So should be able to now think about going back to concentrate really on my trees and where I can sit, you know, situate them. So I'm going to look at the ones that are just a little bit further back and then put those in and then bring these in and then finally pop the foliage over, and then all of that will sink back as well. So again, we're just thinking about the colours in there. You know, you can stick with Payne's grey, but I'm going to add a little bit more warmth, especially to the ones over this side where all that very much that light's coming through. So I'm going to put some burnt umber on there, which is a really dark brown. So the ones in the background, I'm not going to have them quite as warm. I'm going to go for burnt umber and Payne's grey, but you could go for burnt umber and blue, for example. So I'll show you if I add a little bit of ultramarine. It takes the colour very dark. And if you don't want it, if you want it's just a little bit not quite as vibrant, then just put the tiniest bit of white in there. Too much is what I've just done. Look, and it's turned it grey. I don't really want it grey. I want it to be a bit more intense. Let's go in again. Blue, more brown. Some brands, if you use 50-50, it's quite a good mix to get that very dark colour, but you'll have to test because not all of them, just depends on the amount of different pigments and things in. But more brown will warm it up, make it warmer. And more blue will make it darker. Yeah. And then again, you know, just deciding what kind of brush you're going to use. I'm just going to use this round one, and then I'll use the rigger a little bit to kind of make some finer branches. But you don't have to use a rigger, it's just there if you want to try it. So I'll put these ones in the background here. And how dark you go is up to you. You can, if you don't want them too dark, you can always water them down slightly. I'm just looking at where the trunks come in there and trying to fix those in a little bit. And there's another one there. And then I can't really see too much about what's going on. There's a lot of foliage in front. So what I'm going to do, when I can't see too much of what's going on, I'm just going to kind of pop on the top as if it's going over, but then we're going to pop some of these leaves to cover it anyway. These are still a little bit in the background. So I haven't done these two. And then I'm going to put these two thick, bigger ones over the top here. So I haven't quite got my... And I'm just dragging the side of my brush with plenty of paint. I think that having plenty of paint will really help. Just dragging that up to the top and off. I had them floating off the top of the page this morning, but I just bring them all the way up. That works. And if you look at the bases, you tend to get them, the shadow coming one way, which makes sense. And there's this big one here. Add a little bit, slightly bit more brown to this one. So I'm going to get the kind of the main trunk of this one in here, this big one. I'm trying to keep it a bit loose as well, so it's not too perfect, because sometimes it can take the naturalness out. And then I'm just going to wet my rigger brush, and then I'm going to roll it in that paint that I've just mixed. Like that. So it's got a good covering, and it's also keeping it moving is the biggest thing. Being able to move it around, but also have enough paint that it will move as well. And then I'm just going to look at the, some of these branches. You can, with a rigger brush, you can bring it down, or you can flick it up. So it's just really exploring what kind of works for you. Just trying to get a few of these shapes in there. Push the crosses over. There's a few in the background, isn't there? But we're just trying to get a sense, so we don't need to get every single little branch in. We just want to get a sense that these are in the background of these beautiful, this carpet here. So again, I'm moving along, seeing that there's another tree going off here in the background. And a lot of that's coming behind that foliage, which we can pop in. And again, we're just kind of working. It's a really lovely process, actually, just working through those little trees and easing yourself in there. So again, just wiggling these. Just all kind of it's all a bit of so many shapes crossing over, isn't there? All of these. Bring some out. If you've got a bit of structure on one, or a couple of the strong branches, you can bring a lot of these other little ones, these finer ones, just kind of higgledy off the main structure, and it just makes them a little bit more real then as well. And as I said, you can leave some out if you think, oh, I don't want to put all those in. quite a thicket of them here. And these. And these kind of crisscross over, don't they? So this bit always, I think, takes a little bit longer when you're working with trees, but that's fine because the flowers take a lot less time. So I'm going in with this a little bit, perhaps just a slightly warmer, where we might get the light, just kind of. Just added a bit more brown to that mix. So I'm using at the moment, I'm not obviously just using very tiny points, just lightly, and I've got my hand quite far down the brush, so it stops us going in and then it being a bit more stiff with it. We tend to be looser with it if we just do that. The one behind, there's a lot of foliage coming over the top of that one, so I might almost make this a little bit, kind of a bit more grey. And then these will come over the top, so I'm not worrying about that at the moment. Just keep working along, as I said, put in as much detail or as little detail as you want. And then I'll come and pause after this and before we go on to the next bit. You can see how you're getting on. Just have a little look at a distance at what you've got there. Don't know if you can hear that lovely rain on on the studio roof, it's absolutely not. You can hear the birds tweeting now as well, which is just, you can hear it, can't you, when you're looking at this kind of an image as well. Everything's just waking up. I'm not going to stop there, I think. If there's anything else you want to fill in, you can pop in a few other little bits as well if you want to. You can just crossing over any other little colours that you can see. So stop there, take a pause, and come and see how everybody's doing.